Once upon a time, Gregory Johnson burned a flag. Despite the tremendous controversy that his actions sparked, in 1989 the Supreme Court decided that he was within his full constitutional rights to do so. Since then, members of Congress have tried to pass several amendments that would make flag burning illegal, including one in 2006 that failed by only one vote. They say it's offensive. Their opponents say it's symbolic.
See this kitten? Isn't it just adorable? Don't you just want to stroke its little ears, tickle its little belly, crush it with a stiletto?
Wait, what?
Okay, apparently some people find it so adorable that they want to see it being crushed. We won't show you that clip today, but we could. In a recent decision, the Supreme Court ruled that so-called crush videos were protected under, you guessed it, that darn First Amendment again.
Should flag burning and kitten crushing be legal? Does protecting inflammatory or illegal acts under the First Amendment reinforce the honorable intentions of the Founding Fathers who created it? Or does it undermine its meaning and detract from its true purpose? Have we gotten a little too laissez-faire with the freedom of expression? And what role does new media play in all of this?
Excuse me, Lee? Yeah, I have a problem with your shirt.
Why? Am I out of dress code? Is it unflattering? Does it not drape well?
No, it has profanity on it. It's offensive.
It's not offensive. It's what the U.S. calls symbolic speech. It says that if I purposefully and discernibly convey a message, that I'm protected by the First Amendment.
But what message are you conveying? You're expressing what Justice William Rehnquist calls an inarticulate grunt. You're not conveying an idea. You're being an ass for the sake of being an ass.
But just because my shirt offends you doesn't mean it has no value. You support freedom of speech, right?
Yeah, of course. This is America.
Well, don't you think that this violates my right to freedom of expression? Don't you think that banning me from wearing this shirt could constitute censorship?
But it's offensive.
Well, what if I didn't like the shirt that you were wearing and wanted to ban that?
Well, I mean, that's impossible because A, this shirt is awesome, and B, I can wear it if I want.
Exactly. I shouldn't be able to arbitrarily restrict your rights just because they don't agree with my beliefs. Isn't that why the First Amendment was created in the first place? To protect the speech that the government found disagreeable and wanted to censor, a la the Fourth Estate?
Okay, fine, maybe your shirt is okay, but what about kitten crushing? That's not okay by any stretch of the imagination, and I think we can both agree on that.
Well, maybe, but who draws the line between what's okay and what's not?
The Supreme Court does. They rule on these things. They decide.
Yeah, and weren't they the ones that decided flag burning and kitten crushing were completely fine?
Yeah, but how could they do that? Every time they make these rulings, they point out how morally repugnant they are and how they don't condone them. I mean, what does it say about the First Amendment if it causes them to condone things that they wouldn't otherwise, and agree with things that they're not morally agree with?
The government didn't necessarily agree with all of the political dissent either, but they decided to protect it in lieu of the Constitution.
Well, yeah, but that's because they agreed with it on principle. Yeah, they didn't they didn't agree with each and every criticism they received, but, I mean, they agreed with the principle that criticism in general is beneficial and healthy. Kitten crushing isn't political dissent or symbolic speech. I mean, it's not like the Supreme Court agrees with animal cruelty on principle.
Ah, but there is the principle called freedom of expression. They think that, in general, the right to freedom is beneficial, and sometimes that means they must uphold this right, even in cases when they probably don't want to. Freedom of expression is bigger and more important than that. They're sacrificing the kittens to uphold what is, essentially, the foundation of this country.
Okay, but we've got the FCC, and they're allowed to regulate the media, and the Supreme Court seems okay with that. But they would never allow kitten crushing to be shown.
Well, the internet isn't regulated by the FCC, is it? The Washington Circuit Court of Appeals made sure of that this past year.
But why should the internet get special treatment? Shouldn't it be subject to the same standards as traditional media?
But how can it be? It's a completely different animal. It gives voice to people who would otherwise be voiceless. It gives an audience to topics that are on the fringe of acceptable discourse. And yes, that includes kitten crushing. But that being said, unlike TV or radio, where information is often difficult to avoid and usually represents mainstream viewpoints, The internet is a veritable jungle of information, and it's up to the user to find his or her niche.
So you're saying that inflammatory things that wouldn't be tolerated on TV should be on the internet because they're harder to find?
Exactly. You're not going to just stumble across a kitten crushing video. There's a reason it's not the #1 hit on YouTube.
So, according to freedom of expression, pretty much anything goes.
Well, yeah, technically. Save for a few exceptions, like child porn, for instance. But you can pretty much put whatever you want on the internet these days. Now, you could still be prosecuted for doing whatever it is you did, but your rights to publish whatever it is you did are still protected. But again, obviously you're still responsible for those actions. For example, if you filmed your friend who committed a murder and put it online, you might technically be allowed to put it there, but something tells me that the main issue here wouldn't be whether or not you had the right to broadcast that video, but would more be the fact that you were an accessory to murder.
Okay, I guess. But are these inflammatory acts really symbolic speech? Like I said before, stuff like that doesn't seem to have a message. It's just abhorrent, and the people producing it are only doing so because they can.
Well, isn't that kind of the point? That's kind of how freedom of expression works. It might be repugnant and horrible, and it might not have any real symbolic value, but then again, neither do a lot of things. For example, that adorable kitten we showed earlier in this video, what symbolic value does that have? The Founding Fathers didn't have internet, and they probably weren't too keen on kitty crushing either, but they recognized the need for citizens to feel free to express themselves without restriction. Today, we might want to ban kitty crushing or flag burning videos, but tomorrow that could just as easily be an issue of real democratic merit. We need to continue to set a precedent of commitment to maintaining the freedom of expression, even when we don't agree with it.
It's deep stuff. You know what, Leigh? I think you're right. Now, let's hand things over to our friend, Steve Earle.
I used to listen to the radio. I don't guess they're listening to me no more. Well, I talk too much, but that's okay. I don't understand a single word they say. Pissing on about the immigrants. Don't say nothing about the president of democracy. Don't work that way. I can say anything I want to say. The SEC, the FBI.